Did you know that presidential primaries are the principal way to determine who's going to win the general election? Do you realize that with the latest caucus chaos in Iowa, the Democrats have all but sealed their fate for 2020? We're going to look at precisely why the Iowa caucuses were such a humiliating disaster for the Democrats and why it was nothing short of a massive triumph for President Trump. Stay tuned. I think it'll make your day. Greetings, everyone. Dr. Steve here. It's absolutely wonderful to be with you as always. This is your daily white pill of encouragement as we celebrate the inevitable collapse of left-wing liberalism and left-wing liberal globalism, the unstoppable rise of a new conservative age. If you haven't already done so, make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button. You're not going to want to miss a single video where we analyze current events in light of super awesome conservative trends so you can live in the present in light of even better things to come. Now, before we look at why the Iowa caucus was such an unmitigated disaster for the Democrats, let's give a huge shout out to our video sponsor, and that's our good friends over at Noble Gold. You know them well. The specialists over at Noble Gold want to protect your assets with a safety net made up of the trustworthiness and reliability of precious metals like gold and silver. Gold and silver are low-risk assets, and the best part is you can cash out whenever the danger is past. So talk to one of the specialists over at Noble Gold today and see how they can help protect you and your family for what may be coming. Click on the link below and get your free gold guide today, or give them a call at 877-646-5347. You can check them out also at noblegoldinvestments.com. You will be glad that you did. All right, so if you haven't already heard, the Iowa caucuses took place yesterday, and the Iowa caucuses are the first of the so-called primary contests where the candidates for the presidential nomination compete, and of course a winner is announced. Now, everything went fine and dandy on the Republican side, which we'll get into in a bit, but to everyone's utter shock as things stand, not a single vote has been tallied for a single Democratic candidate. That's as of 12:30 Eastern Time. Their apparatus completely crashed, which means that it could take days before we find out who actually won the Democratic contest. They are saying they'll announce it around 5 o'clock, at least some preliminary numbers. But as of now, there were literally no votes on record that anyone could defer to get a sense of what the heck happened yesterday. Now, you may have heard, but things are so bad that a caucus representative was on a conference call with representatives from each of the Democratic campaigns. And this caucus representative ended up publicly hanging up on them because he or she simply didn't have any answers to any of their questions. So now caucus organizers are actually hanging up on the Democratic candidates, for heaven's sakes. I mean, it is that bad. When your own constituents are hanging up on you, you know things are just not going your way. So the upshot of this here is that after months of campaigning in Iowa, the Democrats have quite literally nothing to show for it. Nothing. Nada. And no one actually knows why. No one knows what actually has happened to the votes and the vote tallies that have yet to be shown in the least. Now, they want to govern the country, these Democrats, but they can't even run a caucus. And the only graphic we have thus far is the several Democratic candidates with 0% reporting next to their names, which, if you think it through, is a beautiful, beautiful picture of what is to come, because it stands in such sharp contrast to President Trump. President Trump also had his caucus yesterday. He was up against two primary challengers, William Weld of Massachusetts, who's the former governor there, and Joe Walsh, former representative. Both of them are radical never-Trumpers, and Trump won 97% of the vote. After all that campaigning in Iowa by both Walsh and Weld, they couldn't garner more than 1% of the vote each. And Walsh actually has the narcissistic gumption of claiming that he's now off to New Hampshire to take on Trump there. Don Quixote charges the windmills. He's so narcissistic that he's off to the New Hampshire primary, where I'm sure he'll triumph with another 1% of the vote. These never Trumpers are absolutely bizarre. They have more in common with Nancy Pelosi than they do with President Trump, like Bill Kristol, right? He was once one of the top 3 most influential Republicans. I actually met him at a Republican conference in Virginia several years back. He's just announced that he's a Democrat now. I mean, and God bless President Trump for exposing the left-wing cockroaches that once infested our party. So Trump wins his caucus in an absolute blowout, all the while the Democratic candidates are just, they're just looking completely lost. If you could believe it, last night, one by one, they all gave their own ridiculous victory speeches. I mean, the world's watching. The optics are so bad here because they're all obviously lying. They're all completely and totally lying, right? They're showing everyone that they're all at war with reality. Nobody won, and everyone knows it. So they look like utter fools up there, declaring victory all the while there's a 0% mark next to their names. I mean, it's just absolutely hilarious. You literally cannot make this stuff up. Now, there are a couple of takeaways here. A major one in the midst of all this chaos that I think you're really going to like here in terms of our analysis. And that is that a number of commentators are pointing out that this is, by all appearances, a foreshadowing of what is most likely going to happen in November. Trump is ready to stomp all over the Democratic candidate, whoever that's going to be. He's already set up a very, very impressive ground game in Iowa. So while the Democrats run off to New Hampshire and then to South Carolina and Super Tuesday, they're all leaving Iowa, right? Trump, instead, is staying there. He's staked out a massive on-the-ground team in Iowa, ready to win the state for the second time. So it's not just a matter of the Democrats looking ridiculous. Again, if they can't run a caucus, how the heck are they going to run a country? They certainly look ridiculous. But it's not just that. It's that Trump has already demonstrated with his 97% win that he has the ground game to win Iowa again for a second time, which would be only the second time a Republican has won Iowa since the 1980s. But we can go a step further in analysis of how the Iowa caucuses foreshadow what to expect for the general election. I think there is a very important election prediction model that sees these primaries and caucuses as precursors for the general election. And I'm referring here to a model used by the Stony Brook University professor Helmut Norpoth, known as the primary model. We've talked about it before. According to Norpoth's model, the popular vote winner in the primary always goes on to win the general election. And what's so interesting is that Norpoth bases such an observation by studying elections going back to 1912, which was the first time when candidates had to win a number of primaries. And in each case, the candidate that was stronger in the primary went on to win the general election. And so as a result, Norpoth predicted that Trump would in fact win the 2016 election. And that's because he recognized that while Hillary barely managed to squeak by the primary challenge from Bernie Sanders, Trump soundly defeated 15 of the Republicans' finest, earning more votes than any Republican candidate in history. So just that factor alone, the significance of the primary, means that this absolute and total screw-up among the Democrats foreshadows a complete disaster for them in the general election, no matter who their candidate happens to be. And we seem to have some corroboration for that already, because we saw a very noticeable dip in turnout among Democrats, and this particularly among new participants, those who had never caucused before. So back in 2008, when Obama won Iowa, 57% of Democrats were new participants. They had never caucused before. That dropped off dramatically in 2016, when only 44% were first-timers. But it was even worse yesterday, when only 35% were brand new. And this suggests that voters are not motivated to come out and support the Democrat. Well, or to put it another way, there isn't a single candidate among the Democrats that's galvanizing voter enthusiasm comparable to 2008 and 2016. So you have Trump winning, really in an absolute blowout at this point. And then you have the Democrats completely collapsing in terms of their entire structure, the entire caucus process, which saw a noticeable dip in participation among first-time caucus attendees, suggesting a total lack of enthusiasm for any particular candidate. Now, of course, we don't want to be cocky, right? You always remind us in the comments, which is great, right? Nothing happens if we don't get out there to vote. We don't want to be complacent. But if we apply Helmut Northpath's primary model that sees the primaries as a microcosm of the general election, well, we may be seeing the makings of nothing short of a total and complete 2020 blowout. Now, before you go, I just posted an awesome video on French President Macron's war with the people, his nation. It's really unraveling for him, and I think we explain precisely why the Marxist media isn't even talking about it. I think you'll love it, so click on the link, and I'll see you over there. God bless.